That's how people start YouTube videos these days, right? Anyway, I want this to be pretty to the point, so I'm just going to talk. I have like a little list of bullet points I want to touch on, but for the most part, it'll be pretty freeform. Today, I want to discuss the Pomodoro technique as it pertains to ADHD. And I think what's important to say in the very beginning is that this is kind of an unorthodox approach to Pomodoro technique, and that's kind of the entire point. But anyway, the Pomodoro technique, to describe what it is, it's a rule set by which you time yourself in increments of generally 25 minutes of work, followed by 5 minutes of rest. You can experiment a little bit with those time frames, but that's the general idea. And what I want to talk about for using it with ADHD is how to break those rules and use it for your purposes despite your ADHD, which should benefit your ADHD, at least it does for me. So this year, I started doing it as sort of a pseudo New Year's resolution. And what I realized really quickly was that the benefit is not in doing 25 minutes of work, then 5 minutes of rest. In almost all of my research online, everyone would just talk about how the technique itself is the medicine. Like 25 minutes of work by 5 minutes of rest is what gives you focus. For me, that's not been the case at all. I've realized that it's a tool that you sort of sculpt to your needs like a lot of other tools, and I'll get to some adjacent examples. Some of the common complaints you'll see are that it forces you to break your flow. So like when you finally are in a flow state, the timer goes off and you're like, well, now I have to take a 5-minute break, and you defeat the entirety of that momentum it took you to get into a flow state. I, by trade, am a software developer. I'm a software engineer, and getting into your flow state as a software engineer, as anyone will tell you, is vital. You often don't even really do any work the first 10 to 15 minutes you're working, and it's all about building momentum toward actually getting some work done. Doing the 25-5 method, the true Pomodoro technique, I just found that every time I got momentum, it would break. So what I started to do was I said, what if when I'm in a state of flow, I do my 25 minutes, and then I do 25 more minutes, and then at that point I give myself my 5-minute break, just to kind of see, rather than abandoning the technique altogether. And I'll get to the reason why I decided to take that approach later. But it kind of has to do with meditation and how meditation did not work for me because I was doing the same thing. I was following it in a very, very rigid way where I thought that I had to do it right. I started to have a lot of success with meditation once I let that go, and I tried to just go at my own pace, and honestly started taking guided meditations that corrected my mindset, which at the time was very rigid. I digress. My real point is that the same hurdle that I described with meditation applies here, and you really need to bend the Pomodoro system to work for you. And for people with ADHD, I think what that means is using it as a way to regulate time blindness. And if you don't know what time blindness is people with ADHD, and I mean, maybe there are other situations where people have time blindness outside of ADHD. I am completely mentally handicapped as it pertains to tracking time. Like, you can ask anyone who knows me. For most people who don't know me really well, probably just think I'm an asshole who doesn't care about timeliness. I do care. It stresses me out to no end. But I gaslight myself every single time I need to leave for something, every single time I need to do something. If I'm just going off of my own logic, my own mentality, I will allot an amount of time, and I will always go past that time. I will convince myself by every metric that I've calculated the right amount of time, and I'll always be late, because when I'm not looking at the time directly, when I'm not looking at a clock, when I don't have a timer, when I don't have something constantly reminding me of the time, I don't know what time it is. I've noticed that with medication. Oops, the timer that this video is about sort of just went off. When I take my ADHD medication, I notice that my time blindness gets a bit better, in that I panic and I'm like, oh no, did I just blip out of existence for 45 minutes like I usually do? And I look and it's only been 1 minute. And that, to me, that was actually a very clarifying moment about time blindness for me, is when I got on ADHD medication and had that event happen so many times. Because when I'm unmedicated, or when my medication's wearing off, I tend to just, do something thinking I'm really thoroughly convinced I did it for 5 minutes, and it's quite literally been 30. And I'm like, how did that happen? And this has been happening my whole life. What the Pomodoro technique does, what's magical about it for managing your time blindness. I can have a clock in front of me, and that helps. I have a watch, that helps. But the timer helps me regulate my work schedule even when I'm breaking the rules. What I mean by that is I kind of described it earlier, but I'll set a timer for 25 minutes, do some work, take my 5-minute break. I often take 10-minute breaks. I find that that's better for my brain. And a break doesn't mean do nothing at all, at least for me. A break just means to task switch, ideally not to something that is attention dragging. So like taking a break with TikTok is, at least for me in my ADHD, drags me in way too many directions because you're scrolling from content of one type to content of one type, and doing that process agitates my ADHD like crazy. Here, let me get caught up on my bullet points here. I kind of lost my train of thought, so let me find the bullet point I was kind of on. So to back up a little bit, I jumped to describing how it's helped me, but I want to preface that by saying I was very stubborn about this in the past. Again, I'm 28. I just tried the Pomodoro technique now, and for a period of time, I knew I had ADHD. I was undiagnosed. I got diagnosed in adulthood. And when I was younger, I pretty much knew I had it. I had teachers tell me I had it. Not trying to throw shade at my mom. I understand why she was maybe skeptical in the 2000s, but she was not liking the idea of getting her kid on medication, so she sort of tried to steer away from the entire ADHD conversation. I had every reason to believe that I had ADHD. I thought that believing that was enough at one point in my life. Then I thought getting diagnosed was enough at some point, because then I knew it was wrong with me. Wrong again, like it doesn't fix everything just knowing you have it. And then I thought getting on medication would fix everything that's wrong with me. I think there are give and takes with ADHD, and I personally love like who I am and who I've become, and all the parts of that include ADHD. There are cons that are difficult to live with. But anyway, I digress squared. Once I got medicated, I thought that would fix everything. And for a moment, it kind of does, because you think when you start ADHD medication, this might be controversial, but you think that the euphoria is the medicine. And it's not exactly. If anything, I think I'll make another video on my feelings around that. So end stage, after I realized that medication is not a fix-all, it doesn't automatically fix every aspect of your life, you need to make lifestyle changes if you want to live with ADHD and be productive and meet certain goals that you might have in life. Once you accept that you need to make lifestyle changes, you can start to think of things like the Pomodoro technique not as something that fixes you. It's not medication. It's not your own idea of what knowing you have ADHD is going to do for you. Instead, it is a tool. It's like a hammer. It's a screwdriver. You can use a hammer a few different ways. You can hammer a nail. You can pull a nail out. You can hit a nail out sideways. There's a lot of ways you can make use of that tool. You can smash something if you need to do that. And that's what the Pomodoro technique is for you. So I introduced to you my little Amazon cube, probably some AliExpress junk. I'm not totally sure. But the way this cube works is you flip it on its side and it starts a timer, right? And I keep that right on my desk, right in front of me. And I'll work for 25 minutes. Sometimes I actually love that it has a 50-minute segment, because sometimes that works for me. If I'm really in the zone, I'll throw on 50 minutes. But at the end of the 50 minutes, I force myself to take a break, normally like a 10-minute break or a 5-minute break. If I'm really super in the zone, I'll add another, like 10 minutes onto the timer. And that gives me a little bit more time to work on what I'm doing. But even if you keep doing it, even if you just keep setting the timer over and over again, what you're doing is you're making yourself aware of time passing, and you're making yourself aware of how much time has passed. So looking at a clock, you can look at it and you can ignore it and you can keep moving. The timer is a reminder, okay, beep, 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 25 minutes has passed. And what have I done in that 25 minutes? And you can reflect. And honestly, the parallel to meditation is kind of crazy, in my opinion, because with meditation, it's really the same idea. When I started trying to do mindful meditation, I thought that I'm a failure because I can't clear my head. And that's what meditation is, clearing your head. And then I did a guided meditation that was a lot more explicit about, there's more to it than this, but it was a lot more explicit about the idea being you try to focus on the immediate moment, on yourself, on your breathing, on your surroundings, and you simply notice when an intrusive thought comes in. Even if you're 5 minutes into that intrusive thought, you simply notice, oh, hey, I'm navigating an intrusive thought. Let's go back to focusing on my breath or my surroundings or an imaginary vision of a stream. Once I started using meditation in that way, which is honestly the proper way, I realized that it's a tool for me to identify intrusive thoughts and sort of get a signal and be able to put sticky notes on types of intrusive thoughts. Is this an anxious thought? Am I stressing over bills? Am I stressing over bills on a daily basis? Is it just popping into my head without me knowing? The Pomodoro technique is kind of the same, but instead of being for your internal state, it's more for your like external productivity. It's like meditation for work. It helps me to get work done by realizing when I got distracted. So like sometimes if I set a little 25-minute block, I will get to the end of 25 minutes and realize I wasted 15 minutes watching YouTube videos or scrolling Instagram or drawing out a Dungeons and Dragons story when I was supposed to be working on something work related. What I realized is that it just helps me kind of course correct. And then really you just rinse and repeat that same process all day long, at least all of your work day long. And you can even use it for, hobby projects. You can use it for stuff on the side, but really it's about blocking time, identifying distractions. You get to the end of the 25 minutes. What distracted me? Was I just bored? Sometimes you're just bored. Like normal people get bored. People who don't have ADHD get bored and get distracted. It's not exclusive to having ADHD to get distracted. So this is probably useful for a plethora of people. The Pomodoro technique itself, to my understanding, wasn't made by someone with ADHD or for ADHD. It's just sort of been co-opted by ADHD, and that's why I want to emphasize the importance of sort of breaking the rules. If you're neurodivergent, if you have executive function issues, it may be hard for you to follow the Pomodoro technique. You may try the standard method and say, this isn't for me, it's not working. And I'm encouraging you, break the standard method, break the rules, use tools for your own purpose, and bend the rules around tools for you. I think that's all I have to say. Maybe I'll leave a link to this thing, but you can really just look up Pomodoro Cube, Pomodoro Clock, whatever you want. And it's cheap. You can get them for a couple dollars. I think there's some for like $10, some for $8. Probably get them on AliExpress for cheaper. And, you flip it on its back when you want to pause it. And I can't really show you because it's on its back. Oh, you can kind of see. But it pauses, and just use it for you. Don't feel stressed about it. The Pomodoro technique isn't here to beat you up. Meditation isn't here to beat you up. It's here for you to use as a tool and help you in your own way. Cheers.